So this is your solving equations review. It's everything over chapter 1 that is going to be on your test, which is coming up soon this week. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work through this review a little at a time. That's how I suggested that you do this whenever I gave it to you in class. You have several days to complete your review, but if you don't work on it a little at a time, you won't know when to come in and get help prior to your test. So hopefully you are taking my advice and you're working on this a little each day so that you can get help if you need it instead of waiting to the last minute and trying to do all the problems at once and then not having time to get help. Okay, so we've been looking at solving equations for 2 weeks now. So these first couple of problems on your review, these are a review of one-step equations. So if you're looking for some extra support or you're looking for some extra practice, if you go back to the foldable that we made, that's going to be where you can get those things. So I'm looking at number 6, and the first question we have is x plus 5 equals 7. Now you should have room to work this on your actual review. Remember, you need to show your work. So here it's asking me to justify each step and check my answer after I solve. So here, remember, you're going to ask yourself what's the opposite of what they're doing. So they are adding. The opposite of adding 5 would be to subtract 5. So I'm going to do that from both sides. So remember, last week we worked on writing out our steps. So we are subtracting 5 from both sides. So subtract 5 from both sides. Okay, and that is just using our inverse operations. So positive and negative 5 will cancel. I will bring down my x, so I will wind up with x equals, and then 7 minus 5 is 2. And this would be my answer. Now I can always check that by subbing it back in, and 2 plus 5 is 7, so I know I did it right. Okay, let's look at number 7. For number 7, we have 10 minus m equals negative 3. Once again, I'm looking at what they're doing, or I'm trying to move this positive 10 to the other side. So this is positive 10 minus m equals negative 3. So the opposite of a positive 10 would be to subtract 10. Remember, to undo what's occurring, you have to do the opposite. Positive and negative 10 will cancel, and I will bring down my negative m. Don't forget to bring down that sign. I noticed a couple of you forgot that on your quiz last week. Negative 3 and negative 10, when they have the same sign, you add them and keep the sign, so that makes negative 13. So now I have this negative right in front of m. So remember, that's like a negative 1 times m. So the opposite of multiplying by negative 1 would be to divide both sides by negative 1. A negative divided by a negative would cancel to make a positive m, and negative 13 divided by negative 1 would make positive 13. And then this would be my answer. I could always check that by plugging it back into the original equation. So I'm going to put a 13 right here where m is. 10 minus 13 is negative 3. So I know I did it correct. Okay, so I've done 2 problems for you. Now notice the next 2 are different types of operations. So here on number 8, you're doing the opposite of dividing, and here on number 9, you're doing the opposite of multiplying in order to move things across the equal sign. I'm going to have you pause the video and see if you can do 8 and 9 on your own, and then you can check your work with mine. So hopefully you've had a chance to work those problems and you are now restarting the video to check your work with mine. So I took number 8 and I rewrote it right here in order to have a little bit more room. The opposite of dividing y by 2 would be to multiply both sides by 2. 2 over 2 makes 1y, so I brought down my y, and 15 times 2 is 30. Remember, you can check that by taking 30 and plugging it in for y. 30 divided by 2 is 15, so I know I did it correct. On the next problem, we have 4 times g equals 36. The opposite of multiplying by 4 would be to divide both sides by 4. 4 divided by 4 makes 1g, so I brought down my g. and 36 divided by 4 is 9. You can check that by plugging in 9 for g. So 4 times 9 is 36. So I know I did it correct. So notice on this second set of problems here, 10 through 12, we are dealing with some fractions and we're dealing with some decimals. So we are going to be using our calculator, the TI calculators this week. So hopefully that will help with those of you who are still struggling with your fraction and decimal operations rather than the little 4-function calculator. But this problem is actually nice and easy and clean because we have common denominators, which helps us out a lot. So here I have a positive 3/4, and the opposite of that would be subtracting 3/4. Remember, whatever you do on one side, you have to do to the other. So I know that 3/4 minus 3/4 is going to cancel. That will allow me to bring down x. And then 5/4 minus 3/4. So when you're subtracting fractions, you have to have a common denominator, which we have. Then you subtract your numerators, so 5 minus 3 is equal to 2, and you keep your denominator. So 2/4, which hopefully you guys are aware that that would reduce, and 2/4 is equal to 1/2. Remember, we talked a lot the last 2 weeks. We like fractions, so please use fractions in your answer. 1/2, yes, it's 0.5, but I want you to get used to seeing those fraction answers, okay? All right, so I'm looking at number 11. Remember, I told you guys whenever you see a fraction being multiplied by a variable that you want to divide. And in order to divide fractions, you actually flip and multiply. So several of you last week asked me when a fraction is negative, are both numbers negative? And the answer to that is no. Either the numerator or the denominator will get the negative sign. It doesn't matter which one you give it to, but there's only going to be one negative. All right, so negative 3 over 3 cancels, and positive 2 over 2 cancels, and I'm left with 1w. And then on the other side, remember, you multiply 14 times negative 3. So 14 times negative 3 is negative 42. And then you divide that by 2. And you get negative 21, which is our answer. So I'm going to go through that again. Just for those of you who are still struggling with those fractions, you multiply 14 times negative 3 divided by 2. And that's where I got negative 21. Okay, why don't you pause the video and see if you can work number 12 on your own. So on this problem, I rewrote it as w divided by negative 4, like as a fraction, because that's the way you're going to see it usually. So the opposite of dividing by negative 4 is multiplying by negative 4. So when you do that, negative 4 over negative 4 makes 1w. And then negative 0.9 times negative 4 is 3.6. Notice a negative times a negative became positive here. Okay, so we're going to look at 2 word problems now. These are also one-step equations, but notice that I want to draw your attention to the fact that it does say write and solve an equation. So I know that you could do this without writing an equation. Since it's one step, you could just do the opposite in order to solve. But I really want you to get in the habit of writing an equation because our equations are going to get more challenging. So here they're telling us that we have $437. So I have $437. It says after a deposit. So we don't know how much we're depositing, but they're telling us that we added an amount to the account. So plus X. The balance is $1,087. So there's your equals $1,087. So if this was a testing situation, that would be worth 1x, is having your equation. Now we can solve it to find the amount of the deposit. So the opposite of a positive 437 would be to subtract 437 from both sides. And when I do that, those are going to make 0 on the left side, and $1,087 minus $437 is equal to $650. So I know that if X is equal to 650, that deposit had to have been $650. Okay, see if you can go ahead and pause and write the equation and solve it for number 14. Okay, so on this problem, it tells you that you and 4 friends divide the bill evenly. So the first thing that I did is I made myself a note that that's 5 people. You, that's 1, and 4 friends, that's 4 more. So 1 plus 4 is 5. They tell you up front that each of you pays $7.35, but we don't know our total bill. So when you're at a restaurant and you get the check, if you're dividing it, you would take the total amount that you owe and divide by the number of people if you're going to divide it evenly. So that's where the X over 5 came from. I know that that has to equal the amount that they actually paid, which was $7.35. So there's my equation. Then the opposite of dividing by 5 was to multiply by 5. 5 over 5 made 1, and 735 times 5 was 36.75. That tells me that the bill had to be $36.75. Okay, so that is for our first review video. If you have any questions about any of these problems, hopefully you will come in for tutoring and get some extra help, or you can rewind and watch the video again. You guys have a great evening.